welcome to this IUA market briefing today. My name is Jonathan Reed and I'm a Senior Underwriting and Claims Executive here at the IUA. Today we have GreenShield Risk Solutions returning for a follow-up session after their excellent presentation last year, where they were talking to us about universal best practices for wildfire risk underwriting and mitigation. And in this year's session, GreenShield will be doing a little bit of a deeper dive on some of the key lessons that can be learned from the devastating Palisades fires in the US back in January. A couple of bits of housekeeping from me. We will be recording the session, and the slides will also be made available to attendees afterwards as well. Also, we've got a Q&A function down the bottom right, so if you do have any questions throughout, please pop those in that Q&A function, and I'm sure our speakers will be happy to go through them either as they go or, more likely, I think, at the end. So without further ado, I'd like to welcome our speakers from GreenShield today, Gary Raphael, Paul Brady, and Brian Bastian. Thanks, gents, for joining us. Really appreciate it. And I think, Brian, I'm handing over to you to start things off.
Perfect. Yeah, thank you. And it's amazing. It's been a year since our last presentation. So thank you, Jonathan and Deborah, for helping kind of facilitate everything. We're really glad to be here. I promise, as part of the introduction here, I have 3 very, very quick slides that I want to get through because we want to dive right into Paul Brady's portion of the presentation, which is why everyone kind of joined us today. For those who haven't heard of GreenShield before, just a quick background on like who we are and what we do. So you can see sort of a smattering of our people there on the right-hand side. GreenShield as a business was founded and formed with both a combination of risk, mitigation professionals and former wildland firefighters, as well as insurance professionals. So we're a little bit unique in the space around the kinds of wildfire analytics that we offer. But it is that experience, and Paul Brady, who we're going to be highlighting here today, is he himself is a former wildland firefighter. Many of the fires that we experienced just a few months ago, he has experience on similar kinds of fires in Southern California, and it's that time and experience that he has that we're going to be bringing to today's presentation. So I just wanted to emphasize that we don't often in this space, in this market that we live in, have an opportunity to hear from or speak with someone like Paul. So we're very grateful at GreenShield to have him, and he's been a big part of sort of the various capabilities that we offer. On some of the capabilities that we do have, just very, very high level, and anyone can go out to our website at propertyguardian.com. Paul, if you can go to the next slide. These are kind of the 3 core areas that we at GreenShield are focused on. Today is not a kind of product demonstration by any means, but just to give our attendees and everyone here a feel for kind of what we do is we offer sort of a range of services to help carriers and syndicates and MGAs better understand and manage the peril of wildfire. First and foremost is on the risk and mitigation side. Paul and the team that he's built at GreenShield all have kind of former wildfire fighting experience, and in many cases, wildfire mitigation backgrounds and certifications. So much of what we do is leaning into providing insights on the wildfire peril with prevention, mitigation, and resiliency in mind. We also do quite a bit on the active wildfire side of things, as well as helping our client partners better manage and optimize their portfolios. So that's a bit about us, and certainly please reach out to us after the presentation if there's any interest in learning more about what we do and how we can help you be successful and profitable in the business that you are writing. Now, for today's agenda, this is what we're going to be talking about today. We have a unique opportunity, given the tragic events from a few months ago with Palisades, let alone Eaton and Hearst and Hughes and Sunset. I mean, there are a number of wildfire events. Today, we're going to be focused on Palisades specifically, and with Paul's background and experience, kind of walking through the timeline specifically for that event. Why and when did it start? Why did it behave the way it did, and what did those first kind of 24 to 48 hours look like, in particular in terms of the response? And then also, was it this type of fire predictable? Was this truly an unprecedented event? Is this something that we could see again? Obviously not in that specific area, but there are other areas of California or even outside of California where we could see these kinds of events. And from a mitigation perspective, does that actually matter? at the end of the day. So with that, Paul, I'm going to hand it over to you. And thank you in advance for kind of walking through this with our attendees today.
I appreciate it. Thank you, Brian. And thank you to the IUA for inviting us back. So name's Paul Brady, head of Wildfire Insights and Mitigation here at GreenShield. And I work on the property guardian side of things. So really what I'm going to walk you through today is understanding the Palisade Fire in areas that this could happen again. So it's not enough that we understand what the Palisade Fire, did and how it unfolded, but also it's important to kind of figure out what are the underlying factors that will lead us to other places in Southern California, in Northern California is what I'm going to be walking you here through today, where this could possibly unfold again. Where's the next big one? But first, let's take a little deep dive into the Palisade Fire. Let's learn a little bit about it, learn a little bit about the underlying elements that actually drove the Palisade Fire to do what it did. And then let's kind of take a look back and kind of see, is there any similarities anywhere else within the state of California? So first, most of you here most likely, know about the Palisade Fire and most likely know the timeline, but I think it's good to kind of recap it. And because it really does kind of bring it to life of what really happened during the Palisade Fire. You had a wildfire that ignited at 10:24 a.m. on January 7th, and the first aircraft arrived at 10:50 a.m. So if you want to think about wildfire response, within the first 26 minutes of a fire igniting really within the Palisade area, we already had aircraft on it. It was already dropping on that fire. Evacuations were ordered about an hour and a half later. Evacuations were already ordered. And even though the evacuations were ordered, it was still difficult to get people out. The roads were still congested. By 6 p.m., the fire has reached the ocean and all aircraft were grounded. The reason why aircraft were grounded was because it's in a Santa Ana wind event area. We're going to be talking a lot about Santa Ana wind events. We're going to be talking about how, these come out of the northeast every single time. And what I mean every single time, every single year between October and January, these Santa Ana wind events are going to come. The one that made this one special is that it blew a little harder than most. But the reality is that this could have unfolded almost every single year. The only thing it was missing was the spark. And we'll kind of get into what that looks like. From 6 p.m. to 6 a.m., all the way to the next day, it experiences 60 to 80 mile an hour wind gust, which continued to ground the aircraft all the way to the next day at 6 a.m. Evacuations were still on its way at 10 p.m. the night that the Palisade Fire ignited. So even though they tried to evacuate everybody early, it still was very difficult to get everybody out. More than 6,000 structures were destroyed, 12 people were killed, and LA County officials stated that more resources would not have changed the outcome. The reason why it wouldn't have changed the outcome is because it wasn't a reactive issue. It wasn't a proactive approach to the Palisade area. What we're going to go through today is that you're going to see that, it was going to happen. This was always going to happen. The only difference is that if we had the foresight to see it coming, could we have possibly made it better? And the answer is yes, we could have. But very much what I'm going to show you today is really throughout California, these areas are continuing to grow back. These areas that are affected by your phone and wind events are going to continue to be affected by those phone and wind events, like your Santa Ana wind events and your Diablo wind events. But there is, as underwriters, a way for us to actually understand it. So it's not just doom and gloom and don't worry, this is always going to happen and don't ever ride in California again. That's not what I'm saying. What I'm saying is there's a way to actually understand areas like this and not to be caught off guard. The Palisade Fire grew to over 23,000 acres in the end. So as Brian mentioned, when it comes to property guarding, we do sell our analytics and we do sell our expertise to other insurance carriers to really help them understand the wildfire environment. Back in June, we were asked by one of our builders risk clients to write about a location within the Palisades. And what we wrote about this location, the one that you see highlighted, and you can kind of see the aftermath going back and forth, we wrote, during a Santa Ana wind event, a wildfire in this area would result in significant fire behavior, large flame lengths, intense radiant heat, high ember production, the distance between homes is less than 20 feet, increasing the potential for structure-to-structure ignition. Due to narrow roads and high number of homes, fire response would be limited. Once a fire enters this community, during these conditions, it would be difficult to stop. This was written by Mike Thayer, who's also an NFPA certified wildfire mitigation specialist, who also have fought fire in the area before. Is it because his expertise, like, oh, he knew this because of his expertise? No, we had a lot of data about this area that was ready precursors to this could unfold. It's not enough that we just live by our wildfire risk scores. In fact, we can't do it anymore. We can't just say this is a 70 and therefore we're going to write this risk, or this is a 50, we're going to write this risk. This is 100, so therefore we're not going to write this risk. That's not good enough anymore. Because what we're finding is that low wildfire risk scores are also burning down. So you really don't know where to draw that line. And the reason why is because wildfire models really are about the environment around the structures, not the structures themselves, not the defensible space around the structures themselves, not about the community. It's really a vegetation model. And it's saying how hazardous is the vegetation around it. And the further away you get away from that vegetation, the better the models get. So it's not enough that you get one element, and that's just one element. You have to actually know what's underneath that model. So the reason why Mike Thayer wrote this is because he had quite a bit of data in front of him, and he knew the area. He knew that this area hasn't burned since 1978, which was the Mandeville fire. He knew that Santa Ana winds would come from the north-northeast and push out towards the ocean, which would push a fire directly at the Palisade fire. Our ember fallout model showed that it would go all the way to the ocean itself, and it would shower down on these properties of significance. We also utilize up-to-date aerial imagery, and I'll show you what that looks like. That is picking out the parcels and picking out the defensible space around the structures itself and saying, hey, when embers do start falling, this is going to be bad. We have a lot of elements kind of going into it, and that's really what this is about, is how do we paint that picture? How do we pull all these elements together and really understand wildfire risk? Also, we have a product called Property Garden Overwatch. What this product does is it forecasts fires out by propagating wildfire across the landscape within a 14-day period. We posted this gift on LinkedIn the day that the fire unfolded. While it did, outpace our wildfire model, what it really started to show is that the models knew that unsuppressed, the fire could unfold this way. In fact, it's kind of eerily close that where the aftermath of the Palisade actually ended, which is pretty much running into the Franklin fire and being able to burn the majority of the mountainside above and through the Palisades area, is that the models know that this whole area is hazardous. It's just once you get into that urban environment, it becomes a little more difficult to understand wildfire risk and understand areas like the Palisade fire. I'm going to show you a quick video. It's only 5 minutes. And the reason why I'm going to show the video, because I think it's important that we kind of understand not just the timeline, but see some of the images that came out of the Palisades. I will also say, as you're watching the video, you'll see that it points out where Santa Ana winds go. I will pause it in certain areas, but I'm not going to pause it there. When it comes to Santa Ana winds, they come out of the north-northeast. So when they say, oh, the winds came from this direction, it happens all the time. And it's going to continue to happen pretty much forever in our area here in Southern California. But also when I'm playing the video, the structures that you see burning down, it takes a long time to put those out. So it's a little different than vegetation. We'll kind of get into what that means. I will pause it there, but as you see structures burning down and a structure on fire, just know that's not like the vegetated hillside that goes up and out within, an hour, or even faster than that. What you're looking at is something that's going to take forever to burn out, and it's going to take a lot of firefighters to be able to put out one structure. Now think of the entire city on fire.
The Pacific Palisades, one of the wealthiest communities in the U.S., is experiencing the worst fire in its history. Situated at the foothills of the Santa Monica Mountains, the Palisades typically escape damage as Santa Ana winds blow past, since the winds will usually blow any fire up to the north. However, this time, hurricane-force winds drove the flames directly into the neighborhood, reducing many homes to ashes. On January 7th, around 10:20 a.m. local time, a live camera with 𝗟𝗲𝗿h, a UC San Diego program to monitor wildfires and disasters in real time, picks up smoke rising. This is the first sighting of the Palisades Fire. 6 minutes later, Plane Spotter at LAX catches first plumes of smoke on its live stream.
Not what we want to see here in Southern California. A fire has now broke out.
At 10:58 a.m., resident David Hansen received a video from his mother showing thick orange smoke billowing outside her house on Piedra Morada Drive. The fire size was upgraded from 10 to 200 acres, while containment remained at 0%.
We're in the Palisades Highlands and the fire road is literally on fire.
David Hansen drove to reach his mother and recorded the Palisades Fire as it burned an entire hillside beside the road. From his mother's backyard, David filmed helicopters dropping water onto the nearby fires. He tells ABC News he saw them hovering over the edge of Santa Ynez Reservoir and were using a hose to draw up water. The fire spread rapidly, and flames encroached on David's mother's yard. Neighbors rallied together, using water from swimming pools to fight the advancing fire. With 2 more zones ordered to evacuate and 3 new evacuation warnings issued, David decided to drive out. But with high volumes of vehicles trying to evacuate, and with 3 road closures on the Pacific Coast Highway, escaping the flames proved to be difficult for residents. As David drives, he films the road filled with abandoned cars on Palisades Drive. Firefighters are seen battling the flames.
Something I want to point out here is that when you're looking at like I said, these structures on fire, how long do you think that firefighter has to stay on that one structure to be able to put out that fire? And the reality is this firefighter is not even trying to put out that structure to save the structure. They're trying to save the neighboring structure. But imagine an entire city on fire. This is where more resources are going to be, is not going to really make a difference within the area itself.
David and his mother make it out safe from the flames, and he tells ABC News that thanks to the effort of quick-thinking neighbors, David's mother's home has for now survived.
We're through the fire.
Evacuation shelters are placed around the city, and Governor Newsom declares a state of emergency in California. By night, reports show that the Palisades Fire has grown to 1,262 acres, and 2 additional fires occur nearby, Eaton Fire and Hearst Fire. Windy conditions.
So when you're looking at, when you're thinking about the Palisade area, and you're thinking about, these homes tight together, something that you get when you have a community of tight-knit homes where you could practically touch each other's walls is they use screening, they use hedges in order to get stuff that's tall enough, because ordinance is usually that you can't have a fence that's over 6 feet tall. So they use vegetation to get higher up and be able to really block someone. What they utilize in these areas are things like Italian cypresses. And what you see in this video is an Italian cypress burning. So it's not just that, these embers are landing on the structures themselves and burning up the structures. They're literally packed with vegetation in between these structures. And what's ended up happening is that these embers are starting to fall on that vegetation, which then puts heat onto the side of the structure and then starts catching the structure on fire. Now, obviously, there's structure hardening stuff that also comes into play, meaning of, yes, the embers can go into the attic space and light something on fire, but it's much easier to light like an Italian cypress like this on fire. And when you're thinking about embers falling on the city itself, this is the picture you should have in your head. If you see all the little embers kind of going across the street and going throughout the area itself, that is what the structures have to withstand to survive in a wildfire area when the hillside is burning. The difference is it goes from a vegetation fire to structure fires, which is going to put off a lot more heat, a lot more embers, and burn for a lot longer. It's a different environment.
Complicated firefighting efforts.
We're getting a 70 knots wind speed. We're going to have to shut down water dropping operations. Also, cancel it 2 additional copters.
January 8th, 12:29 a.m. Palisades fire size has grown to 2,921 acres and is upgraded to 11,802 by.
Once again, think about how long it will take for that structure. All the vegetation is already out. That structure is just going to continue to burn. And it's important to remember that when I show you the next slides within the demo.
11:45 a.m.
Unfortunately, we have 2 reported fatalities to civilians Unknown cause at this time, and we do have a number of significant injuries.
Lydia Fire, north of the 3 active fires, starts around 2:07 p.m. At 5:57 p.m., CAL FIRE reported that the Sunset Fire in the famed Hollywood Hills had started, bringing the total to 5 active fires in the state. The Palisades Fire remained the largest, reaching 17,234 acres by the end of the day, with 0% containment. Weather forecasts indicated another round of Santa Ana winds expected from January 9th to January 10th, with a new high-pressure system building from the north, fueling more gusty winds. The Sunset Fire, which crossed more than 40 acres, was fully contained, but at 3:12 p.m., Kenneth Fire started to burn 50 acres in West Hills. On January 10th, the Palisades Fire has grown to nearly 20,000 acres with 6% containment, and the Eaton Fire to nearly 14,000 acres with 0%.
When you look at this area, you have this imagination that a fire actually is able to roll off the hillsides and burn through the structures and hit the ocean itself. That's not what's happening. If you look at this area here, it's surrounded by asphalt concrete roads. And reality is that embers are falling on the properties. The structures are then lighting on fire and burning other structures. And then when there's nothing to burn, it stops. And that's the reason why you have structures that are survived and structures that didn't. So they're spot fires, is what we call them in the fire service, is spot fires. An ember ignites, it ignites a new fire. And that new fire then burns down the building, and the buildings burn into each other, and we'll kind of get into that. But just know it's not this flaming front that runs down and then pushes across the landscape all the way to the ocean itself. In fact, it's very much the opposite. It hits the bottom of the hillside and the fire goes out from a vegetation standpoint. And then embers during that entire time are raining down on the properties themselves, which were igniting things on fire.
Containment. Governor Newsom calls for an independent investigation into the, quote, loss of water pressure to local fire hydrants and the reported unavailability of water supplies from the Santa Ynez Reservoir, following a Los Angeles Times report that the Pacific Palisades Reservoir had been closed for repairs at the time the destructive fire started. Firefighters across the country, as well as Canada and Mexico, arrived to help battle the flames. Local authorities vowed to find out what exactly caused what is on track to become the worst natural disaster in U.S. history based on costs.
This task force is made up of local, state, and federal partners designed to investigate the cause of these fires and to see if there's any connection between them.
As of Wednesday, January 15th, at least 25 people have died, and more than a dozen others remain unaccounted for. 4 fires are still active, with Palisades Fire covering more than 23,000 acres and 19% contained.
So now I'm going to get back into the presentation. So it's not enough that we just see the aftermath of the Palisades or even be able to see that video and really understand the speed in which something was moving. So I do think that also showing you the timeline of how fast this fire can unfold is also important. And also when you're kind of thinking about this, I want you to start thinking about the vegetation that's around it. Because as much as, we have to understand the built-up environment, we also have to understand the vegetation. The vegetation is why these fires can move so quickly. The vegetation is the reason why these fires can be so severe. Even though these fires are destroying the homes, and that's what we kind of hyper-focus into, that, oh my goodness, it can destroy an entire city. The reality, though, is that the vegetation is the main driver of the wildfire. So yes, we have to also pay attention to the vegetation. We also have to look at the built-up environment. But the vegetation is a precursor of if a significant wildfire could impact this area. So this fire started at 10:24 a.m. on January 7th. By 3 p.m., the fire has already made it pretty close to the ocean itself, kind of burning through little areas that had it started burning structures as well, but also burning areas that had other vegetation. By 6 p.m., it already hit the ocean and spread pretty significant. And to kind of give you the scale in which this fire can move. This kind of keep this snapshot in your head. By the next day at 1 p.m., it already did almost everything it was going to do. It's doing that off mainly vegetation, even though it is burning up structures, even though it is going through cities. It's mainly burning the vegetation itself. And that's because of the Santa Ana wind events, and that's because of the topography, and that's because of the fuel. And structures are also fuel. By the 9th, it started backing towards the north. By the 10th, it's continued to back towards the north. It's also moving a little more west. And by the 11th, it's really done what it's going to do. So why was it able to move this quick? Well, even your most basic wildfire classes will tell you that fire behavior is really 3 elements: your topography, your vegetation, and your weather. Your weather would be that Santa Ana wind event, and also your seasonality within the area itself. And wind. You also have your topography, which is the alignment, and honestly, the reason for your Santa Ana wind events, because it is a topography-driven wind system. And then you have your vegetation. Your topography and weather, that's going to really stay the same. What's exacerbating these wildfires is the vegetation. The larger vegetation, the more fire behavior you have. The less vegetation, the less fire behavior you have. So I'm going to show you a street view prior to the Palisade fire in that location there, to really kind of give you an idea of the vegetation in the area itself. And really what you're going to see is chaparral that's, upwards of 10 to 12 feet tall in this area. What you kind of see is, I picked this one because there's some people in it, but you can kind of see how tall the vegetation is. It's severely overgrown. Remember, the last fire in this location was the 𝗪𝗏𝗁 fire back in 1978. And the reality is even though you say, oh, it's all green, no, there's dead stuff underneath. So Southern California, how our environment works is that everything will turn green during spring, and it actually is very pretty. But then it dies during the summer, everything turns brown. That brown stuff doesn't come back to life. It stays dead and it just compacts onto the ground. And then green stuff grows over it and it looks pretty again. So what you can actually see here is that there's quite a bit of dead material within here. There is a lot of dead fuel in here. That dead fuel is ready to burn. As soon as that Santa Ana wind event hits, it doesn't take long for little sticks to dry out. Really within 1 to 10 hours, all your small sticks are starting to dry out. And this place is ready to burn again. The only difference is now we just have an enormous amount of vegetation ready to burn. It is because we're stopping the areas from burning. That's because we now live in these environments and we can't let these fires actually burn up into the cities themselves. So I'm going to show you a little aerial imagery demo. And kind of, break down the Palisade from a different perspective. So we also work with a vendor called 𝗪𝗏𝗁. So 𝗪𝗏𝗁 is our aerial vendor that we put their aerial imageries within our reports themselves. But it's important to understand the Palisade from a different perspective, being able to see a before and after. So here's the Palisades itself. So you can kind of see the fire, ignited in the area above here, and then pretty much burned up this entire area, burned through the Palisades and went to the ocean itself. Your Santa Ana winds, they're going to come down from this direction. So what you have is the Palisade, and then you have the aftermath of the Palisades itself. And if we kind of take a look back and say, okay, was there any common factors within the Palisades? If I go and turn on the damage footprints, we kind of back out a little bit. This entire area actually burned quite hot. And it burned quite hot because of all the structures that it burned through this area. If I kind of go a little deeper into this area, what you'll see is that the winds are going this direction. This is where the winds are starting to push. They're pushing down like this through this area here. So anywhere on this block, if this structure were to ignite, it's going to burn into this structure, into this structure, into this structure, into this structure. Not only is it going to do that, if you want to think about it this way, there's 80-mile-an-hour winds pushing down if this structure were to ignite, how long do you think this structure would? Remember, I was telling you that these structures are going to burn for, upwards of 4 to 5 hours. And that's honestly probably an underestimate. That's without firefighters putting it out. It's just going to continue to burn. What ends up happening is that this structure has to survive with this on fire, or this structure has to survive with this structure, this structure, this structure on fire. It becomes where it's a community effort rather than just, is my structure good? So if we go back to the structures themselves, and I'll turn off the building footprints. If you look, everybody has hedges across the board. There's your Italian cypresses there. But everybody has hedges across the board. The reason why is because they don't want to see their neighbors. And so as embers are falling on these properties, once these hedges start to ignite, it then burns down this property. And guess what? That just took out the whole block. You're not just betting on one structure surviving, you're betting on the whole block. In fact, I have one structure I wanted to show you, which is this one here. We'll put this in 3D mode. See if I can get a better view of this structure. There we go. So this structure, I would say, is a relatively good structure. In fact, did everything that this person probably could have done for their structure. There's a little bit of hedges that they could have wiped out. But the reality is when we're looking at this structure, it's not terrible compared to the rest of the environment. There's actually quite a bit. This is where Santa Ana wind vents are going to come from. There's quite a bit that is going to, separation. So as an underwriter, we're taking a look at this, be like, there's a little bit of vegetation. It looks like they have good hardscaping. Doesn't have any eaves. Maybe this property is a good property. The problem is we're so hyper-focused into one small location that we're not looking at the entire environment, not knowing that this structure here is completely dependent on this entire block surviving, because that's the way that the Santa Ana wind events are going to blow. So when we're looking at these areas, and you kind of take a look, nothing in this area survived. It's not that you're trying to pick this gem in the middle of the block. No, as soon as that defensible space involves other structures, that is just what's going to unfold. That is just what's going to. If a fire unfolds in that area, that is going to be in their defensible space. That is what is going to affect them during a wildfire event. Now, something else I wanted to show you is up here. Now, this one probably survived off luck, so I'm not saying that this is the structure to kind of place your bets on. But if you look over here, the vegetation is actually still, there's still quite a bit of vegetation off to the hillside. This area got nuked, it burned pretty hot. But as soon as it got down here, a lot of the vegetation survived. The reason why the vegetation survived is because the fire, lowered its intensity within this area. Embers started falling onto these properties, igniting everybody's hedges, igniting everybody's structures, and then pushing. So once a fire comes from here, that's one type of fire. Once a fire gets into structures, that's a lot hotter fire that's going to burn a lot longer, and it's going to immediately, the resources in the area, make them not very effective. Also, if you want to think about it this way, no one's shutting off their water. So as a structure burns down, the pipes break, the water starts to flow, starts to drain these areas very, very quickly. And the reality is the water systems is really in these areas is to put out a couple structures. It's not made to put out an entire city on fire. So you're now taking away tools away from those firefighters as well. And I will say the firefighters in this area are the best wildland firefighters really in the world. And there is a lot of them in a short amount of distance, and yet this still unfolded. But when we're looking at a structure like this, that actually has some separation between the structures themselves, and has separation between, some vegetation, as you see kind of in that 5-foot area, it's able to survive right on the hillside itself. Meaning this structure is better off than the structures all the way down here once this environment starts to burn. And that's really because of the defensible space. And what I usually say and what I tell underwriters is that if you're breaking your underwriting guidelines because it's outside their control and saying that this structure is a good bet, even though they can't control their defensible space and they still need to do stuff because they did everything within their power, that's still not a good bet. You can't just insure a structure because it's in an area that is outside their control. In fact, I pulled a report real quickly. This is one of our reports. The parcel's high, but if I go down here, kind of go to the parcel itself, this is that same structure. And what you see here is all of this is going to affect the structure itself within 100 feet of its defensible space. So if they do everything within their power, but yet their neighbor looks like this, I'm still breaking my underwriting guidelines because this is still going to affect this structure. This is still going to affect this structure. And so when you're looking at your properties, you have to look a little further out than just what's directly on my property itself. We also had this area, and so that's really how the Palisade unfolded, and to kind of put a cap on the Palisade. So what do we take from it? What can we learn? And can we see where the next big one's going to be? Obviously, we can't tell you the time it's going to ignite, but we can tell you what areas are just as severe as the Palisade fire. So what we also do is we track burn areas that burn because they rekindle. The reason why fire burn scars behave the same way is because the topography and the weather in that area doesn't change. The vegetation grows back and then it behaves the same and actually burns across the landscape the same way it did before. And if there's more vegetation this time than the last time, it can burn even faster, and burn even more intense. We had the Palisade area actually 25 years overdue for a burn of 2,000 acre fires, 2,000 acres. And so what we do is we look at an area, and we say, can this area sustain a 2,000 acre fire given the regrowth of the vegetation within its burn scar? And the answer was yes, it got there and then exacerbated for the next 25 years. So we had, years remaining for this location, 25 years overdue for a 2,000 acre fire, just off the burn scars alone. When it comes to the severity in these areas, severity is, how severe is it within this area? We had the mountain fire here, and this was some back testing that we did, but we had the mountain fire here at the 94th percentile, the most severe area when it comes to a fire possibly igniting in the area. If a fire ignited in the area, that this would be a severe area if it did ignite. And as you can see, it kind of burned up the entire area as soon as it did ignite. It burned up the entire severe location. And there's a Palisade there, kind of circling the Palisades of where severity models were looking at it. So where can fires happen today, given the burn scars that are out there, and the regrowth potential within that region, because we do look at it from region to region. Where can a 2,000 acre fire happen today? And these are all the locations, given the burn history within California, that a burn can actually happen today and reach that 2,000 acre mark. I'm not saying this is going to be an extreme fire behavior within this location, but it can at least have a 2,000 acre fire. So it is a fire of significance. It is not going to be a small fire if ignited in these locations during kind of the worst conditions. What you have here is Southern California, and it almost looks like the entire mountainsides are painted. But as you can kind of see here, the Palisades did get better. Same with the 𝗙𝗲 fire area, that also somewhat got better. But it's starting to come back. What you have here is you have the hillsides here. These hillsides are all in alignment with Santa Ana wind events. And so when you're thinking about Santa Ana winds come from the north, northeast, and kind of push down. You have this area over here, which is actually, I'll point out this area over here. This is your crestline area. That place is severely overgrown and quite due for a wildfire. You have your, right here between Temecula, really, and Dana Point. Your Fallbrook area is right here. So just above Fallbrook, that entire canyon is one day going to burn quite hot. In fact, when it does, it's going to be pretty significant. So all these areas that you see within these light areas, and even the dark areas, can at least have a 2,000 plus acre fire. But remember, I said that the Palisades was a little unique because it was 25 years overdue for a wildfire. It didn't hit just zero. Okay, now we have a significant fire in this location. We hit that mark and then we went 25 years more. these are all the locations that in the next, that are 25 years past due for a significant wildfire in this location. Here's the areas throughout California. This is highlighted in more of your dark reds. What you have here is, this area is actually not looking too bad right now. But still, here's your, Temecula area that's going down here, that's going down, near the Fallbrook area. That mountainside is severely overgrown. You have that crestline area here. And this is not even taking the severity into account. And what I mean by the severity, it's not taking, is this a high-risk location given the vegetation in the area? What this is purely just looking at just the reoccurrence of burns that already happened in the area. So it's really important to understand. Remember when I talked about Palisades and I said the last fire was 1978. That's important. It's important because that's how much vegetation was able to regrow and die year after year after year. So taking a look at everywhere, and this, I don't have to prove a fire can happen in this location because a fire already happened in that location because we're only looking at burn scars. And these areas are 25 years now past due for a fire to happen in this area. Now, remember, you still have to look at the cities in front of these areas. You still have to look at, is the built up environment conducive to kind of do what the Palisade did, but at the same time, understanding the fact that, the burn history within this area is important to understand because that is the main driver of the wildfire unfolding. That's if the firefighters are going to be able to catch it in time. So here's the model itself. And so this is what the model looked like before the Palisade. In fact, before the Palisade fire, but 2024, before 2024. And what you can actually see here, this area here is Mountain Fire. This was really, it was between, it's now time for it to have a 2,000 acre fire to somewhere between that and negative 25 years. And that's what's highlighted in red. And everything that's above 25 years is highlighted in dark red. You have the Palisade here, which a lot of that location within this area was actually ready for a wildfire. In fact, here's a Franklin fire, which is that over 2,000 acre fire. You have a fire over here near Gorman. That one was ready for a fire. We all know the Eden fire. Here's the Eden fire over this location. This one over here is near the Temecula area. So what does it look like today? Fire is not a bad thing in Southern California. In fact, these areas are meant to burn. It's meant to burn, actually quite more significantly than we allow it to burn. And it's really comes down to one thing. Either we can take away the vegetation or Mother Nature is going to take away the vegetation for us. It's just going to exacerbate so bad because we stopped it from happening over and over and over again. So here's the area today, which looks quite good. Here is the Park Fire. When it comes to the Park Fire itself, you can kind of see the overlay of the Park Fire. Some of these areas were actually 25 years overdue for a fire. In fact, you can kind of see the surrounding environment. There's still some areas that could have a significant fire or significant fire behavior within that location. And this is what it looks like today, because a lot of that vegetation now cleaned up and kind of hits that reset button on these locations. But it is a reset button. It is not something like a permanent button. Now this place is good. It's a reset button until that environment starts to regrow, and then it's able to do exactly what it did today, just later down the road. Now I'm going to get into really quickly, and then we'll take some questions. So here's our Property Guardian Overwatch product, but I do want to show the fire history. So let me turn off the fires that are in this location, and I'll turn on the fire history. I'll kind of go down into this area. What you have here is, here's a Palisade fire, but I want you to get an idea of how often this area actually burns. So you have the Palisade fire. In fact, if you kind of look at this, you see this nice little ring. That's because it ran into the Franklin fire over here. Because it ran into another burn scar where it's no longer able to continue to burn. I mean, that's really what burns do. It takes away the vegetation and doesn't allow it to burn as well as it would have is if we just let it grow for a very long time. Here is your Wildfire that is is doing, actually did good work from a vegetation standpoint since 2018, even though we know it was terrible for the community. And then you have fires all over the hillsides itself. And so you have the fires kind of going across the hillsides. All this is city. It's stopping at the city, but embers are going to continue to shower down into the city itself. All this comes from really your Santa Ana winds and then also overgrowth of vegetation. Even coming down here, here's your 𝗪𝗪𝗁 area. It's over here, your 𝗪𝗪𝗁 area. When it comes to the wildfire environment, tracking the burn scars to see what's the precursor of what can happen tomorrow is extremely important. I'll get back to the demonstration. So how much does California burn? And the answer, it burns a lot. In fact, it is meant to burn, as I've been saying since the beginning. It's just tracking of really what are the intervals in which these areas burn, and have we exacerbated that to the point where it's going to have extreme fire behavior. Really, there's a century of wildfire burns within the area, and everywhere that there is vegetation within Southern California, this place is meant to burn. We keep a lot of these fires small because they happen in good times of the year where we can control them. And like I said, we have some of the best wildland firefighters in this location. To give you an idea of how much protection is in this area, within the Palisade area at that one structure, there was 44 fire stations within a 20-mile radius around that. It's considered, by all intents and purposes, well protected. Gets the A. But really, that's really good from a kitchen fire. That's really good from a keeping a smaller fire within the structure small. But the reality is that during a unfolding wildfire, it is good, but not when we neglected the surrounding environment to the point of really no return once a fire happens in that area. It's too late once the fire happened. So also looking at wildfire history was 1978, the Mandeville Canyon fire. The Mandeville fire grew to 38,000 acres. Santa Ana wind events again, lost 215 homes in the Palisades, killed 3 people. The 1938 Topanga fire in this area burned 16,500 acres. Really wildfires fanned by Santa Ana wind events. The Topanga Canyon fire destroyed 350 buildings. This is not new. This is not like, oh my goodness, I can't believe this happened, never seen this coming. It's happened before. So really taking a look at history is extremely important. Does mitigation matter? Absolutely. But if you build the structures so close together that they're within each other's 100-foot defensible space, you're dependent on your neighbor, and their mitigation matters too. So mitigation does matter because you're really just trying to stop a cigarette from lighting the structure and thousands of them landing on the structure themselves. As long as it's landing on non-combustible environment, as long as you have, good flame and ember resistant venting, and you kind of name it, non-combustible roofing and siding, and you have all the structure hardening characteristics, and you have, really good vegetation maintenance around your property. Yes, absolutely, your structure can survive. Because the flaming front doesn't just jump off the hillside and run through the city. You're protecting your structure from embers. You build them that close together, you give the blocks the right alignment where it's just going to push one structure into the next structure. Now it's a little bit different environment. And yes, your defensible space does matter. In fact, it matters so much that your neighbor's in your defensible space, and once that structure burns down, it takes you out too. With that, I'll pass it to Gary.
Thanks, Paul. Appreciate all of that. Obviously, hi, everybody. On behalf of Paul and Brian, I wanted to thank you again for carving out some time to join us today for this important and vital discussion. Paul has just spent the better part of 45 minutes dissecting the events as they unfolded in Pacific Palisades. And he gave all of us some exacting detail and a lot to think about in terms of fire behavior and the challenges faced by local resources to influence outcomes. And clearly, better outcomes are what we all ultimately want. But my other hope is that you recognize the depth of understanding and firsthand experience with wildfire that's required to provide this level of detailed analysis and then translate it into actionable insights for the insurance industry. We're going to give you some time to think about some immediate questions you might want to ask Paul as a follow-up to some of what he presented, or for GreenShield and Brian and I more broadly. But I wanted to call out the slide on the screen that Paul just mentioned. It's the last one in the deck, and it summarizes the core services we offer at GreenShield via our Property Guardian product suite. And as you'll note, it also includes a QR code, which provides a direct conduit to our webpage for additional information about the services that we've touched on and some that we haven't. As an added incentive for anyone who attended today's session, anyone who registered for the call is eligible for a complimentary GreenShield wildfire report on a property of their choosing. All you have to do is reach out to me directly using the email address that's on your screen, and we'll get you squared away. All we need from you to get started is a street address. So hopefully you'll take us up on that opportunity to see what we can do at GreenShield firsthand and in a bit more detail, and for a property location that has particular meaning for you. So with that, we have a few minutes left. We have about 5 minutes left, and just want to open it up to any questions that anyone has. I know that there's a mechanism for people to submit questions. And I don't know that we've received any just yet. Well, we actually have received one question, and so Paul, there's a question about other regions in the U.S. or regions globally that would have similar weather characteristics and topography that would mean a similar set of events could take place as it pertains to wildfire. Do you have some thoughts you can share on that topic?
Yeah, so the answer is absolutely. So it's not just about California. Yes, California has the 𝗟𝗲𝗿 wind event and has the Santa Ana wind event. But if you track the phone winds, for example, Colorado, you have the Chinooks, and you have other phone winds throughout the United States that do affect those areas. And yes, it exacerbates off the vegetation itself as well. Just since I've mentioned Colorado, so even talking about Colorado. Really, they had a large, while ago now, had a large lodgepole pine die-off in those areas. In fact, they have really severely overgrown forests because they do exactly what we do as well. We stop our wildfire smoke. So all that lodgepole pine that we can't get to, that is still in their forest, ready to burn. So exacerbating those areas, and also in alignment with their Chinook winds that are going to be affecting really that Denver area.
Okay. What about GreenShield? I don't see any additional questions having been submitted yet, but Paul, in that same vein, can you talk a little bit about GreenShield's capabilities as it relates to beyond the state of California? I know the tendency from a wildfire perspective is for everyone to sort of myopically focus on California, and rightfully so, but from the standpoint of insights that GreenShield can provide beyond and outside the boundaries of California, can you speak a little bit to that?
Sure. So our reports, our capabilities, even our wildfire reoccurrence model that you kind of saw there, including all the data and all the analysis that we do, is really throughout the lower 48. We don't have a blind spot in the lower 48. When we built this, we built it to make sure that we cannot just give really good analytics about California, but we can give good analytics and good expertise across the lower 48. So if you do want to know more about other regions, as the slide says, contact Gary, and we can get you connected to the right people.
Okay, helpful. Maybe in the absence of another question, I'll ask you one more, if I may. So, so can you share a little bit about your view? You've obviously you touched on a number of techniques from a mitigation perspective that you think are time tested and have obviously the potential to impact outcomes and improve resiliency at the structure level and the property level. Anything you see on the horizon from the standpoint of construction structural techniques, things that are potentially going to be deployed in a more common way over the course of the next 5, 10, 15 years that you think will influence outcomes in a profound way that are only now being discussed, but potentially have the chance to become a bit more ubiquitous with time?
Yeah, I know that California in general is looking at their 5-foot area. So their 5-foot area is becoming very important to them. So the 5-foot area around the building itself is becoming extremely important. It is important. Think about a small fire, everything starts with a spark. Embers land on the property itself and start igniting, near the walls of the structure itself. But then it starts igniting the structure, getting into the siding of the walls, getting into the vegetation near the walls and kind of putting a little larger flame, whether it be in the decks and you kind of name it. But I know California is starting to focus on that. If you want to look at mitigation standards kind of out there that you'd be able to download, even for free, you can go to the IBHS website and kind of download that information and take a look at that information as well when it comes to mitigation. I will say this though, and I think this is important because it's not as we're not different than areas like that experience other events. There's a reason why we don't build brick houses in California. It's because we have earthquakes. There's a reason why there's stilts on the East Coast is because they have flood. The only thing that's going to change our environment is when we start adopting those codes as severely as the others. Is when we look at the wildfire environment in Southern California and say, hey, our homes need to withstand fire the same way homes on the East Coast need to withstand flood. And not only that, the surrounding environment, I'll give you another example of the Palisade today is going to be a low risk score. There's no more vegetation in that area. Can we lower risk scores in the model? Absolutely. Yes, we can. Take away the vegetation, it lowers the risk score in the model. But it also lowered the severity in that location. And what it comes down to is we have to do a little more large scale mitigation, not just at the property level. It's really good. Yes, we should be doing structure hardening. Yes, we should be doing defensible space. But we also need to start going into those areas that haven't burned in the last negative 25 years beyond when it could have had a 2,000 acre fire and start doing large scale mitigation. Once we start doing large scale mitigation beyond, and really that's at the community level, now we're turning in an environment, now we're taking control of our environment. If we want to build up on the hillsides, that's fine, as long as we actually start taking control of the environment itself and starting to take that vegetation down to the point where we could control a fire during a Santa Ana wind event, and it doesn't burn up an entire city.
Got it. So really useful holistic perspective. Thanks. Considering the time constraints, I know we're at the top of the hour. Jonathan, maybe I'll turn things back over to you in the absence of, I don't see any additional questions, so I'll pass it to you.
Yeah, thanks, gents. And I guess just to close from my side, a really special thank you to Paul for his insights today, and obviously to Gary and Brian as well for supporting that. And lastly, just many thanks to all the attendees today for coming along. And we hope it was of real interest. It certainly was for me, and a very insightful presentation into, I guess, how the structures actually tend to be one of the big problems in this region. Certainly something I didn't know. So yeah, really appreciated that. And just a reminder to everyone, we will be circulating the slides and the recording also by email to all the attendees. So without further ado, we'll bring a close to this session. Thanks, gents, and thanks to everyone.
Yep.
Yep.
Thank you.
Thanks, everybody.